Good morning, y'all. I want to start this video by asking you to picture something for me. Picture a gate, not a small backyard gate. A gate in the geological sense. A gate that sits at the junction of two of the most powerful fault systems in the United States. A gate that has been swinging open and shut for 1,000 years, depending on the stress conditions on either side of it. A gate whose position, open or closed, determines whether a future major earthquake in Southern California stays on one fault and causes catastrophic damage to one corridor of communities, or crosses through and ruptures two fault systems simultaneously, spreading catastrophic damage across a far larger geographic footprint. A gate whose swing in the wrong direction at the wrong moment could be the difference between an earthquake that kills hundreds of people and one that kills thousands. Now I want to tell you what the peer-reviewed science published just 6 weeks ago in the Journal of Geophysical Research says about that gate. It says the stress on both sides of it, the stress that determines whether it stays closed and blocks a rupture or swings open and lets it through, has reached the highest levels recorded in 1,000 years of seismic history. That is not a metaphor. That is not a tabloid headline. That is the finding of a team of scientists from the University of Bern, the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the U.S. Geological Survey Earthquake Science Center in Pasadena, and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego, published in one of the most rigorous earth science journals in the world on June 3rd, 2026. And I want to make sure every person watching this video understands what it means, and equally importantly, what it does not mean, before this information reaches them from a source less committed to honesty than this channel. Let me start with the geography, because the geographic specificity of this research is one of the things that makes it so significant and so concrete. 50 miles northeast of downtown Los Angeles, tucked between the San Gabriel Mountains and the Mojave Desert, sits a mountain pass called Cajun Pass. Interstate 15 runs through it, the highway connecting Los Angeles to Las Vegas, along with major railways, natural gas pipelines, and electrical transmission lines that serve millions of people in Southern California. Cajun Pass is also, as the new research describes it in language that has now appeared in CNN, Fox Weather, LAist, Science Daily, and the Temblor Earthquake Science publication, among many others, an earthquake gate. And to understand what an earthquake gate is, you need to understand the two fault systems that meet there. The San Andreas Fault, the most famous fault in North America, the 800-mile crack in the California landscape, where the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate slide horizontally past each other at a rate of approximately 2 inches per year, runs through Cajun Pass from northwest to southeast. The San Jacinto Fault, the second major fault system in Southern California, accommodating a significant portion of the plate motion that the San Andreas does not, runs parallel to and east of the San Andreas, and approaches the San Andreas most closely at exactly this point, Cajun Pass. Together, the San Andreas and San Jacinto faults accommodate approximately 90% of the relative motion between the Pacific and North American tectonic plates in Southern California. They are, in the most literal sense, the geological architecture of the region, the fault systems that have built the mountains, shaped the valleys, and periodically released the energy that has been building in those plates since the last major earthquake on each segment. Now, I want to introduce you to the lead scientist whose work is at the center of this story, because I think understanding who did this research and how they did it makes the findings more concrete and more credible. Dr. Lilian Burkhardt is a geophysicist at the Division of Space Research and Planetary Sciences at the Physics Institute of the University of Bern in Switzerland. Along with co-authors Dr. Bridget Smith-Conter of the University of Hawaii at Manoa, Dr. Catherine Scherer of the USGS Earthquake Science Center in Pasadena, and Dr. David Sandwell of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego, she built a physics-based 4-dimensional earthquake cycle model, a model that simulates fault behavior in 3 dimensions across time, that runs through the last 1,000 years of seismic activity along the southern San Andreas and San Jacinto fault systems. They incorporated geological evidence, tree ring records, sediment samples, paleoseismic trench data, to constrain the timing and size of past major earthquakes on both fault systems. They then used that reconstructed earthquake history to track how stress has accumulated and released along both faults over the millennium, arriving at the present day with a quantitative estimate of how much stress is currently stored in the system. The results, published in the Journal of Geophysical Research on June 3rd, 2026, are unambiguous. Tectonic stress in the region has reached, and in some locations surpassed, levels seen at any other point during the 1,000-year period examined by the model. And the specific fault segment carrying the highest modeled stress in the entire 1,000-year reconstruction is the San Jacinto Bernardino segment, registering 6 megapascals, a stress level that exceeds its previous recorded peak from nearly 50 years ago. Let me explain what megapascals of tectonic stress means in practical terms. because it is one of those units of measurement that is precise but not immediately intuitive. A megapascal is a unit of pressure. 1 million pascals. A pascal is approximately the pressure exerted by a dollar bill lying flat on a table. A megapascal is 1,000,000 times that. 3. 6 megapascals of stress on a fault segment means that the rocks along that segment are under pressure equivalent to roughly 520 pounds per square inch above the background stress state. Pressure that has been building slowly and continuously for decades, and in some places for well over a century. And the key finding from the Burkhardt study is not just that the stress is high, it is that the stress is now roughly matched on both sides of the Cayenne Pass junction, on both the San Andreas side and the San Jacinto side simultaneously. And that matching of stress levels is exactly the configuration that the historical record shows allows the earthquake gate to swing open. The researchers found, by analyzing the earthquake history of the past 1,000 years, that earthquakes passed through the Cayenne Pass junction and ruptured both fault systems when both sides of the pass had similar levels of high stress. And, in Dr. Burkhardt's own words, the words that have been quoted in CNN and Fox Weather and Layist, and in every major piece of coverage of this study, that is the configuration we are approaching today. I need to spend real time on the historical examples the researchers used to illustrate how the earthquake gate works, because those examples are the most concrete way to understand the stakes of what the science is describing. The first example is the 1857 Fort Tejon earthquake, a magnitude 7.9 event that remains the most recent truly great earthquake to strike the greater Los Angeles region. The 1857 earthquake tore more than 330 kilometers along the San Andreas fault system, from Parkfield in central California all the way south to just north of Cayenne Pass. At that point, at the Cayenne Pass junction, it stopped. The earthquake gate was closed. The stress on the San Jacinto side of the junction was not high enough to receive the rupture and continue propagating. The energy that had been building on the San Jacinto system was not yet matched to the stress on the San Andreas side, so the junction blocked the rupture rather than transmitting it. The result was an earthquake confined to the San Andreas fault, devastating in its own right, producing a surface rupture, scar 217 miles long that is still visible today according to Caltech, but contained to a single fault system. Now compare that to the second historical example, the 1812 Wrightwood earthquake, a magnitude 7.5 event. In 1812, the stress on both sides of the Cayenne Pass junction was more closely matched, and the earthquake gate was open. The 1812 rupture crossed through Cayenne Pass and propagated through both fault systems simultaneously, affecting both the San Andreas and San Jacinto systems in a single event. The 1812 earthquake killed approximately 40 people, in a region that in 1812 was home to a small fraction of the population that lives there today. If the 1812 scenario were to repeat in modern Southern California, a joint rupture crossing Cayenne Pass and affecting both the San Andreas and San Jacinto systems simultaneously, the consequences would be of an entirely different order of magnitude. Dr. Burkhardt is explicit about the scenario. A joint rupture crossing Cayenne Pass could reach a magnitude of 4 to 7. 8, affecting a far larger geographic footprint than a single fault event would on its own. Cities including Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Coachella Valley could face simultaneous damage, along with the major highways, railways, and energy infrastructure that run through the pass itself. The USGS shakeout scenario, based on a magnitude 7, 8 rupture on the southern San Andreas alone, estimates roughly 1,800 deaths, 50,000 injuries, and $200 billion in direct damage. That is the single fault scenario. The Burkhardt study puts a more severe scenario on the table, a cross-fault rupture in which both the San Andreas and San Jacinto systems fail together through an open earthquake gate. I want to pause here, as I always do when covering research like this, and deliver the same honest message that Dr. Burkhardt herself delivers at the end of every interview and in the conclusion of the published paper itself. The study is not a prediction of when an earthquake will occur. In her own words, what we can say is that the system is critically stressed and that physics-based models like ours give a clearer picture of the range of scenarios we should be prepared for. This information is important for hazard assessment, infrastructure planning, and emergency preparedness. Harold Tobin, the director of the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network and a professor at the University of Washington, who was not involved in the study, reviewed the findings and told Layist the idea that all of those segments of the fault could have enough stress for an imminent future earthquake was already there. This study provides a clearer, physics-based picture of what was already understood. That is the correct framing. This research does not change the fundamental reality that a major earthquake will occur in Southern California at some point. That has been the scientific consensus for decades. What it changes is the precision and the physics-based grounding of our understanding of what that earthquake might look like when it does come, and specifically, The new and important insight that the Cajun Pass junction now carries the conditions that historically have allowed ruptures to cross between fault systems rather than being confined to one. What makes the earthquake gate concept so scientifically valuable, and why it is attracting attention not just from California seismologists, but from the international geoscience community, is that Cajun Pass is not unique in the world. It is the most well-studied and most immediately consequential example of a fault junction. But fault junctions, where multiple large fault systems intersect at complex angles, exist in many seismically active regions globally. New Zealand's Alpine Fault System has junction points. The North Anatolian Fault System in Turkey has junction behavior that researchers have been studying since the devastating 1999 Izmit earthquake, which itself propagated along connected fault segments in a sequence. The research framework that Burkhardt and her team developed at Cajun Pass, the physics-based four-dimensional earthquake cycle model that tracks stress across both space and time and identifies the conditions under which a junction acts as a gate rather than a barrier, is explicitly transferable to those other settings. As Burkhardt noted in the Science daily coverage of the research, the framework we developed is not just applicable to California, but also for other complex fault junctions worldwide. This is not just a California story. It is a contribution to global earthquake science that may improve hazard assessments for fault junction areas in countries around the world. Now I want to talk about what the Southern California landscape looks like in the context of this research, because the human geography that sits above and around the Cajun Pass junction is something that every person who lives in or has family in Southern California needs to hold clearly in mind. The greater Los Angeles metropolitan area is home to approximately 13 million people, the second largest metropolitan area in the United States. San Bernardino, Riverside, and the Inland Empire Corridor, which sits directly along the San Jacinto Fault System, is home to several additional million residents. The Coachella Valley, which extends southeast of the Cajun Pass Junction through Palm Springs and Desert Hot Springs and Indio, is home to hundreds of thousands more. The combined population that would be directly affected by a joint rupture crossing Cajun Pass along both the San Andreas and San Jacinto systems simultaneously exceeds 15 million people. And the infrastructure sitting between these two fault systems is some of the most critical and most concentrated in the country. Interstate 15 and Interstate 10, two of the most heavily traveled highway corridors in the United States, both cross or parallel the affected fault segments. The major railway lines connecting the Port of Los Angeles to the rest of the country run through the region. Natural gas pipelines and electrical transmission corridors that power Southern California's grid pass through Cajun Pass itself. In the shakeout scenario based on a single fault M7, 50,000 injuries, 1,800 deaths, and $200 billion in direct damage. A cross-fault scenario through an open earthquake gate could substantially exceed those already staggering numbers. I want to close by talking about what every person in Southern California should do with this information, because the researchers themselves are clear that the purpose of this work is to inform preparedness rather than to generate alarm. The science is telling us that the system is critically stressed. The science is telling us that the configuration we are in today historically correlates with earthquake gate conditions that allow ruptures to cross fault systems. The science is not telling us when. And the gap between the what and the when is precisely the gap that personal and community preparedness fills. Here is what I need from everyone in the greater Los Angeles region, in San Bernardino, in Riverside, in the Coachella Valley, and anywhere else in Southern California within reach of these fault systems. First, know what to do when shaking starts. Drop to your hands and knees. Take cover under a sturdy table or against an interior wall away from windows. Hold on until the shaking stops. Do not run outside during shaking. These actions, executed in the first seconds of an earthquake, are the difference between surviving and not surviving, and they cost nothing to learn and nothing to practice. Second, have water stored. After a major earthquake on the San Andreas or San Jacinto systems, water service will be disrupted. Pipelines will break, treatment plants will lose power. The minimum recommendation is 1 gallon of water per person per day for at least 2 weeks. For a family of 4, that is 56 gallons. Have it stored before the earthquake, not after. Third, know your home's vulnerabilities. Older unreinforced masonry buildings, the kind common in historic Southern California neighborhoods, are among the most seismically vulnerable structures that exist. Soft-story apartment buildings, where the first floor has a garage or open parking instead of structural walls, are among the next most vulnerable. If you live in either type of structure, understand that vulnerability honestly and make a plan. Fourth, support continued investment in California's Shake Alert Earthquake Early Warning System, which provides seconds of warning before shaking arrives and is already operational across much of California. Seconds of warning is enough time to drop and take cover, to stop a train, to halt an elevator, to give surgeons the chance to step back from an open patient. Every second of warning saves lives. That system deserves continued investment and expansion. And please share this video with everyone you know in Southern California. Not because the earthquake is happening tomorrow, because the earthquake is going to happen. The scientists have been saying that for decades. The new research from June 3rd, 2026 makes the picture sharper, clearer in its physics, more specific in its geography, more honest in its acknowledgement of where the stress has accumulated and what the historical record says about what happens when that stress releases. The earthquake gate at Cajun Pass has responded to stress conditions for 1,000 years. The stress conditions it is responding to right now are the highest in that millennium. The scientists are watching closely. I am watching closely. And the 20 million people of Southern California deserve to watch closely too, and to be prepared. I love y'all. Stay safe out there.